Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar Speak Smart Communication Skills for Everyday Success. I am Ankita from Spring People, India's largest enterprise training provider, and I'll be your moderator. Clear and confident communication is key to success at work and in life. Whether you're leading teams, joining meetings, or having everyday conversations. Today, you'll learn practical tips to improve your communication, boost your presence, and connect better with others. From active listening to avoiding common mistakes, you'll gain tools to speak with clarity and confidence. It's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Premlata Nair, a leadership and behavioral trainer with over 25 years of experience. She is a certified life coach, NLP practitioner, certified POSH enabler, POSCO torch bearer, and council member of WICCI's Karnataka Anti-Sexual Harassment Council, actively promoting safe workplaces. Mrs. Nair co-founded Max Plus Consulting and Srishti Learning Services and now partners with multiple organizations focusing on people development, coaching, and leadership. She has received several leadership excellence and super style awards and is a proud Rotarian committed to community service. We are honored to have her here today. Now, before starting, I want to say if you have any queries during the session, please send your questions in the question box and our expert will address them in the Q&A. Over to you, Mrs. Nair.
Hey, thank you for that wonderful introduction. A very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar on Speak Smart for Everyday Success. Okay, so during this session, I'm going to share with you a lot of experiences, examples, and I'm making sure that this session is going to be very lively and interactive for all of you. Okay, so let's deep dive into this session to understand and see what's in store for us today. So the agenda that we will cover today will be, yes, we're going to talk about, I'm not going to define communication skills, but I'm going to say how communication skills matter. We'll discuss on clarity and confidence. We will also look at the importance of active listening and non-verbal cues. We'll also share some common communication pitfalls, which we normally go through on a daily basis, and also share with you some plans of how we can avoid them. Okay. We all do high stake communications in everyday life, right? So in our daily life, in whatever roles we play. So we're going to be discussing about that. I'm going to share with you a lot of examples, okay, and scenarios, and that's how we're going to discuss the entire session, right? So like the way we will take the question answer session towards the end of the session. So please keep dropping your questions. In the last 10 minutes of our session will be dedicated only for question answers, okay? So let's deep dive into our session. Why communication skills matter. I'm sure all of you know that communication is a cornerstone, right? We all do this in and day out, right? We do different kinds of communication on a regular basis, right? One is we do communication is just not that while we speak to others, we also do a lot of communication within ourselves, right? So if you have to define that, it is like both interpersonal and intrapersonal. Interpersonal is what we do with others, okay, while we socially communicate, but intrapersonal is something which we all do within ourselves, right? So communication skills are very, very important, be it both within ourselves or while we communicate. So while we are communicating, we communicate with our friends, we communicate with the social circle, we communicate within our office setups, right? So there is various kind of places that we communicate. So, but communication is very, very important as to how and why it makes a lot of difference in our lives. Okay. Now look at this beautiful saying here, which says that what does it say? Of all the skills available, communication is one of the most important and empowering all the time, right? Why? Because it's like a lifeline for us, right? It's like one of our life skills, right? We do it day in and day out, right? So it becomes very, very important for us. So with this quote, I want to move ahead into this session. let's look at the role of communication in our success today, right? Why it builds trust and strong relationships, right? While communication, see, trust is something which we don't gain overnight, right? It takes a long time. Trust is something which builds over a period of time, right? Only when trust is built, your communication gets a little more stronger, right? So that while you do excellent communication, you will be able to build trust and also build strong relationships within people whom you all transact on a daily basis. It enhances clarity and reduces misunderstanding, right? So while you communicate, while I will also be using some examples here, right? It enhances your clarity and reduces misunderstanding. While we communicate clearly, there is no chance of any misunderstandings, right? It becomes very, very clear, right? So in our next sections, when we go through the active listening part, we will probably go deep into this. Okay, it boosts confidence and personal influence, right? Because while we are communicating, it also increases our self-esteem and our personal influence also. So while we communicate, we always, I'm sure you must have heard about the term called as persuasion skills, right? Or influencing skills, right? They all are part of our communication, right? So how we persuade people, how we influence people are also plays a lot of role in our daily lives, right? So while we learn these skills, it gives us a lot of boost our confidence as well, right? It drives us to a better decision making. So if we are able to communicate properly with people with lot of clarity and intent, it also becomes very easy for others to understand us. While others understand us, it also becomes easy for people to come to, I mean, decision making becomes very, very easy, right? It strengthens leadership and team performance. So while the first four are, if the first four goes very well, then it automatically strengthens each one of us, our leaders, right? We might not have a leadership tag with us, right? But we are leaders in our own roles, right? And we are all team players. While we are in a team, either we might be leading a team or we might be part of a team. We all part of a team. So when we communicate clearly, have built trust within people, reduce misunderstandings, boost, all of us are very, very confident, right? So it automatically, it strengthens relationship and also gives us better teams are there, better teams are there, and they always perform better. Let's look at the impact on our personal and professional growth, right? So whatever tips that we share today applies both to our personal as well as our professional lives. Now, from communication is very important because it also helps us in enhancing our collaborations, right? Enhance collaboration because we all are, like the way I said, we all work in as team players, right? So collaboration is very, very important in both our personal as well as in our professional lives. How collaboration is built, like the way I said, trust is very, very important. So trust lays the foundation of all, right? And like the way I say, trust is not gained over time. It's all depends on how you communicate and gain trust from people. So building trust is also very, very important. With that, enhanced collaboration becomes deeper, right? While while you are strong on your communication skills, while it's also a career path for us, right? Our leadership development skills are also, they also grow simultaneously. So it makes a lot of impact on our leadership development. It boosts our self-confidence and career advancement. See, we are not in the same role always, right? We keep moving from one role to another. If I'm a team player today, I might move into a team lead, and it goes on. So I move into a senior manager role. So I move on into different roles as I grow in my career journey, right? So it is also, communication plays a very important role at every stage of our life. And that is the reason why we say communication is like a life skill, right? We have to really gain the knowledge on how we can really make it successful in our everyday lives. Okay, let me tell you a small story here, right? This story is I'm giving a story of two salespeople, right? So I'm sure by the end of the story, by the time I say the story, there are a lot of thoughts which will come into your mind, right? So once upon in a country, in a large shoe manufacturing company, the manager wanted to get overseas business, right? So what he did was he sent two of his salespeople, maybe to the land of Africa, right? To a village in Africa, he sent them, and he thought he wanted to expand his business there. So he sent his two salespeople to go and see the market and come back with a lot of inputs whether the market is suitable for selling shoes, right? So once the salespeople reached the village, they made a lot of research in the entire village. And once they came back to the company, and the manager called them for the meeting, right? So the meeting was called for, and along with that, a team of people were also there. So based on the strategies, what the salespeople discussed, the manager thought that, okay, based on what they say, we will take a call on it, right? So he asked the first salesman, hey, what about how did the project go on and what did you do there, right? So the first person reacted saying that, hey, that particular village, nobody in that village wears shoes. There is no market at all, he said, right? It would be a waste of time and resource to pursue this. So this was something what the first salesperson said, right? So the room felt silent for a moment. Then the manager turned to the salesperson too, and he asked him, hey, now get me your views, right? So with a spark of enthusiasm, the second salesperson responded, nobody in the village wears shoes. That means the market is completely untouched. There is a huge opportunity, he said, right? Same place. What I'm trying to tell you is, same place both of them went to. The fact was the same. Nobody wears shoes. That was the fact, right? So, but then two different perspectives, right? The fact was the same, but two people had two different perspectives. Why? Because communication isn't just about facts, it's all about how you frame it, right? The first salesperson focused on the absence of the demand. The second person focused on the presence of the potential. That's the power of how we frame our messages. In your daily communication, whether you are giving feedback or whether you're pitching an idea or solving any kind of a conflict, whatever it could be, right? We go through many different kinds of transactions during the day. So it's not just what you say, it's how you say that shapes actions, influences minds, and creates possibilities. I hope you like this story. And probably if you have any thoughts, please keep it till the end and we will probably discuss it. So with that story, I want to move forward and focus on clarity and confidence in communication, right? Clarity and confidence in communication is very, very important. How, not just what I say, but how I say is also important, right? So, and of course, the confidence should see, sometimes I might not be, I don't, I'm sure maybe the way I say today to you, right? The confidence with which I'm taking this session today with you makes a lot of difference. The clarity in which I speak to you would definitely make a lot of difference, right? The same way, while you are communicating on a regular daily basis, you might not be seen in front of a person. You might be doing it over the phone. You might be doing it with your cameras off and we might be discussing, but still you can have the clarity in your tone, the way you speak, the way you emphasize on those words and show that confidence, right? And just don't forget to keep that smile on your face, right? That is what is called as confidence, right? So confidence is very, very important. That is where I say, think before you speak. We always say that, right? Think before you speak. So have that clarity of thought before you want to convey, and use simple, direct language. We should not be using very complex languages which people don't understand, but always keep your sender in the mind, right? The sender in the mind is very, very important. while you convey the messages, right? The way, because you need to know what kind of the sender, whether the sender understands the jargons that you're trying to speak, but those abbreviations that you're trying to say, is it understood by the sender? So clarity is very, very important. Along with it, your confidence is also very, very important. So make your sentences very simple and direct. Pause with purpose, right? So it's important to pause. Now, for example, even when I'm taking the session with you, it's not continuous, right? Though we may not be interacting, I'm doing a pause with all of you, either through a story, or I'm sharing a quote with you, or I might be giving an example. So that's the pause, right? So you need to be pausing also while you speak to people, because that allows you to also think, and also allows the other person also to give their thought processes. So pause with the purpose. That's also very, very important while you are communicating. Maintain eye contact and body language. If you are face to face in a conversation, eye contact is very, very important, right? Because that's a part of our body language. It's very, very important while we speak to others, right? Like the way I said, most of us today either we work from home, or we work on, various different situations. We might not be meeting people, but if we are meeting people, then the eye contact should be intact. We should probably know that the other person is seeing us and we are in line with them. And an open body language is very, very important. Speak with intent and belief, which means while speak with a lot of passion, speak with the intention to be heard and to listen. That's very, very important. And whatever you say, it should always have the conviction in what you are talking about. The belief should always be there in saying, right? That's when you have this, automatically the clarity in communication is always there. Now, let me give you a simple example of clarity in communication, right? Now, look at this cluttered sentence, right? How do you see this cluttered sentence now? Due to the fact that the team, which was previously informed about, so there is too many confusion. If you are reading this particular statement, right, there seems to be too much of a confusion, right? This is a very classic example of a cluttered statement, long, confusing, and packed with many, many unnecessary words, right? Phrases like, due to the fact that the team which was previously informed, right? So all this is really confusing. Now let's break this into small, simpler sentences, right? So our task now is to identify unnecessary words, break the sentence into simpler parts, rewrite it clearly and concisely. Okay. Now, what do we do? When we break it into simpler parts, we will probably say the team was informed, right? They didn't give feedback on time. Okay, like I'm just breaking into small parts. As a result, the launch got postponed. That's the core, right? So what could the sentence be, right? The team was informed about the upcoming changes but didn't provide timely feedback. As a result, we are postponing the launch to a later mutually agreed date. See how beautifully we have rewritten this sentence, right? With a lot of clarity in simple English, which is easily understandable by everybody. So that way, with this, a small simple example is what I wanted to show you, to just talk about clarity in communication. Now let's move into the next segment on active listening and non-verbal communication, right? I'm sure all of you have heard about the word called as active listening, okay? So while we all also would have heard another word called as hearing, right? We hear and listen, right? It's just not listening I'm talking about here. I'm talking about active listening, right? So in active listening, non-verbal communication plays a lot of importance. Whether you are on camera, off camera, seeing the person in front of you or not, it does not imply. It's applicable everywhere and anywhere, right? So we always say that, right? We have one mouth and two ears, right? So we should always be attentive to understand, right? So let's understand what is active listening and what is exactly is non-verbal communication. So why does communication almost fail, right? Not because of what is said, but because of what is not heard. What a beautiful sentence this is. Not because of what is said, but because of what is not heard, right? So active listening is a process of receiving. Okay. Now receiving means, like, like this, you're sending the message, right? When you are just sending the message, input, I can just, or in other simple words, input, I can talk about it, right? So when you input, when probably when somebody is telling you something, right? So you are looking at constructing the meaning of it. So very often what happens is, when somebody is trying to tell us some things, we don't want to listen, but we want to quickly answer. We want to put the person down, we want to stop him in between, and we want to give him an answer. So there is, the processing starts in our mind as soon as the person starts with the first word, which is not right, right? So when a person is already in an input stage of giving you, right? In communication, we know, in the communication triangle, if you see, right, there is a receiver, there is a sender at the other end, and in between there is the message, right? So there are three parts to it. One is the receiver, other end you have the sender, sorry, the sender, the message, and the receiver, right? So sender I can consider as, the input that he is giving to the other end, the receiver, right? When the message is being sent, all sometimes the receivers, sometimes we get so impatient, right? We don't do active listening, right? What we do is, we try and stop the person in between. We don't want to listen him, right? So active listening is all about processing the input what you receive and giving constructive meaning to it, and also giving a thoughtful feedback. A thoughtful feedback means a message which is with full of empathy, based on the situation. So only when you do active listening is which you can do that. Now let me ask you a question. Okay, it's a question for yourself to ask, right? Do you think body language plays a very important role in active listening? Yes, my answer is yes, it plays a very important role, right? Now, if I'm asking you a question and I'm pausing in between, right? The tone, right? If you've observed me in this entire conversation, my tone may not be the same. My tone would have varied, right? If I had the same tone from the very beginning till now, I'm sure most of you would have got bored. Yes or no, right? But I would definitely, I'm modulating my voice, right? I told you a story, right? I modulated my voice so that I have my listeners on the other end are able. So I know who my listeners are at the other end, right? So that way, I'm trying to give you a constructive message, right? So my body language, my tone also plays a very important factor while I'm conveying. So tone is also part of your body language, right? For example, in the 93, in a conversation when we are doing, the way you show that, I mean, for example, if you're in a face-to-face kind of a conversation, the way I use my hands, the way I present myself, okay, that makes a lot of difference, right? So when I said, for example, my entire body language, the tone, and I mean the voice modulations that I do is probably 93% important, and 7% goes to the words that I say, right? So if I have to make my listeners active on the other end, then it's also important for the person who is sending the message to make sure that the message is constructed properly, and so that the sender also understands, right? So thoughtful feedback is also very important while we convey our kind of a thought process, right? Why active listening is important? Because it enhances our clarity, builds trust with people, right? Deepens strengthening in communication. So you want to build trust with people, be an active listener, right? See, now I give you another choice, right? So now how do you build trust? One of the things could be to become an active listener in all the conversations, right? While you do that, it's also important to foster relationships and reduce. So when you listen carefully, what happens? There is no misunderstandings, right? Everything is very, very clear. So in that process, when there's a lot of clarity, stronger relationships are built and you reduce all the misunderstandings. In our workplace, active listening is very important because we are, when we all work continuously for a long duration, right? Sometimes we are stressed, right? All those things happen sometimes. So I always say people, be self-aware of what you are doing and be very mindful of what you say, right? Be self-aware and be very mindful. I want you to keep this thought till the end of our session and take it back with you. Being self-aware and mindfulness is very important in communication, right? So why? Because why, if you are self-aware and mindful, automatically active listening becomes a part of something running in your veins, you say, right? So it becomes a part of the same, right? So with that, when you are actively listening, automatically workplace collaborations are great, right? You're able to understand people easily, right? And then conflicts are less because you understood what the other person is trying to say. While you understand others, you are more empathetic in your communication. Your judgments are much better, right? And your decision making is also more. That way, active listening plays a very important role. So be very fully present and responsive, right? We create environments where people feel heard. See, when you are an active listener, it's very important that you be in the present moment. When somebody is trying to tell you something, I see, for example, if you are on the phone, okay, yes, I understand. So these are some kind of words that you can say while you are on the phone. In case you are speaking to the person face to face, all the more important that you pay attention, keep your open, that's keep your body language open. Don't be on your phone. Sometimes, we are always on the phone. When somebody is telling us something, we are busy doing something else, right? So which means then there is no active listening. You might have not heard the entire conversation. So the input, remember we talked about the communication medium, right? The receiver, the message, and the and the sender, it all goes haywire, right? They become lot of, all these become as barriers in your communication, right? So what happens is, if we are doing listening, we are listening to something, let's be in the present moment. Let's listen to them properly. No deviations. The phones that which come to us, right? Let's talk in case we are in a very important conversation. Let's make sure that we don't take the phone calls. So it depends upon the conversation that we do. So active listening becomes very important. We have to make people feel heard. That is very important, heard and valued. So what are the key components of active listening? Paying attention, body language, providing feedback. Like the way I explained to you, body language plays a very important role. Pay attention. For example, like the way I said, okay, when keep your phones aside while you are conversing. Nods are very important. Hey, if you're on the phone, I like the way I said, hey, yes, I understand. Go on, please. Yes, I can understand that. So those are some things that, okay, right? So those are some things which you can always, do while you are on the phone. So and provide feedback. Also, it's also important that you provide feedbacks. Okay. Sometimes what happens, we differ in thoughts, right? While the sender gives you some message, there are some differing thoughts in you. Okay. But while you are differing with the thoughts, because like the way I said, perspectives are different for every individual. Great. So while you are doing that, be very assertive in your conversations. What is assertiveness? You are respecting the other person's viewpoints as well as respecting your own viewpoints, right? Remember I said mindfulness and self-aware is very important while you are differing. Hey, so you can always say like that, hey, I do understand what you're trying to tell me. These are my viewpoints, right? So what happens is you're also respecting from the other end. You're also trying to share your thought processes, right? And then it's also important to summarize the entire conversation. For example, if you are on a project, if you're listening to the current status of the project, if you're called for a meeting, right? Then probably we have to summarize it. Summarizing is important. for us to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what we discussed, and then this is how, and probably it's like the MOMs that you all write, right? So summarizing is very, very important in any kind of a conversation, and that is also one of the greatest components of active listening. Why? Because it important non-verbal communication, like the way I said, it could be my hands, it could be my gestures that I use, it could be my eye contact, it could be it's my voice modulation, my tone, right? All those play a very, very important role in non-verbal communication, because it helps to build. When my non-verbal communication is taken care, the other person understands, other person feels valued, right? So it builds communication and connection, right? It builds trust and connection. It reinforces the verbal message, the tone that I'm trying to say, right? It reinforces just the verbal messages, right? See, now that you can see text only while you are on the screen. You are seeing the text messages. But what am I trying to do? I'm trying to reinforce the text with you with a lot of examples, right? So my facial expressions, for example, if I was in a face-to-face in a class with you all, right? Then you could have seen my facial expressions, the gestures, they all will add a lot of meaning, right? And the emotion to the message. Shows engagement without interrupting, leaning forward, mirroring. For example, if you are in a face-to-face conversation, that makes a lot of difference. Helps interrupt hidden emotions, right? Your tone, your facial cues, your body language, all those are part of your non-verbal communication. And when you take care of all these, it reduces your misunderstandings and helps to clarify the meaning, and there is a lot of confusion which gets avoided. So active listening, when coupled with non-verbal communication, makes you all great listeners, right? So let's look at a small quick video here.
Alice works at a local department store. She spends most of her day interacting with customers and coworkers. There's a lot of talking involved, but there's also another form of nonverbal communication that's being used just as often: body language. Body language is the process of communicating through nonverbal signals. It includes things like our posture, facial expressions, gestures, and more. The meanings of these all vary from culture to culture, but we instinctively read body language and interpret it as some expression of moods, feelings, or intentions. So in Alice's case, even before she speaks, she may be communicating all kinds of things to customers. For example, if her arms are crossed and she's avoiding eye contact, customers may not find her to be very approachable. However, Alice could be in a friendly mood, even though her body language suggests otherwise. And this isn't necessarily a conscious choice that she's made. This could just be how she habitually presents herself. But if Alice is aware of these habits, she can work on improving her body language. Changing your habits can be difficult, but if you take time to pause and check in with yourself, you can start to notice them and adjust things to become a better nonverbal communicator. This awareness can also be applied to reading others' body language. Let's say Alice notices that her coworker is unusually quiet, has his body turned away from her, and is slouched over. She may pick up that he's upset, or that there's an unspoken issue at hand. Depending on Alice's relationship with him, she may want to give him some space or ask if anything's wrong. Being aware of the various aspects of body language can make all the difference in how people perceive you and how you perceive them. Be aware of how you present yourself, and you can say a lot without speaking.
Okay, so that was a video which we really saw. What we learned all the while, what we learned in the last half an hour, what I was trying to emphasize with you on clarity, the body language, how you show, is what we really saw in that video, right? So it's very, very important as to how we really, while maybe somebody is coming and talking to us, right? We can't be on our phone or on our laptop. We have to probably pause there and understand and probably listen to the other person, right? So while we discussed all about this, there are some common communication pitfalls, okay? Or in other words, we could call them as barriers that we always see. So let's identify what are those common pitfalls one by one. Okay, listening to respond and not understand, right? Sometimes what happens, like the way I told you, right, which earlier I just gave you an example, when somebody is coming to try and tell us something, right, while before he says the first 2 3 words, we don't want to probably listen to him. We immediately start to respond, or our mind starts to think, hey, what should I tell him next, what should I tell him next, right? So we are only listening to respond and not to understand. Okay, seek to be understood and not understand. So we already have a statement like that, right? So that's very important. Overusing jargons, right? Because we don't know whether the person on the receiving end understands what you're trying to say. And making assumptions, right? We sometimes we make assumptions on our own, right? Hey, I thought it was like this, this is what I thought. For example, you would have attended the whole of the meeting, right? And if you had not done the active listening part, then we start making a lot of assumptions. So assumptions also become a very common pitfall or a barrier in our communication. Okay, being distracted because we are not at the present moment. We might be doing multitasking jobs, right? So while we get distracted, or like the way our intrapersonal communication, like the way I said, right, the intrapersonal communication does a lot of thought processing in our head, right? So we get distracted, right? Failing to provide feedback. Okay, sometimes feedbacks are never given after the entire conversation is over. A feedback is never given on it, right? So that could also be another roadblock or a barrier or a pitfall in communication. And ineffective body language, right? Like the way I said, even when you don't really use your body language, your tonality, the way you converse, the way you say what you, if I'm saying I'm angry, I have to really make the way. So that tonality also makes a lot of importance. So it is not what you say, it is how you say in communication, right? That's a statement I always want you all to remember. Not what you want to say, but how you want to say is very, very important. Okay, that you can always do only when you use the powerful body language. Okay, now how do you strategize? What are some strategies to avoid these pitfalls? Practice patience. Okay, remember I told you self-aware and being mindfulness is very, very important. Practice your patience. Use clear language. Okay, seek for, if you have not understood something, don't assume. Seek for clarification. Ask them, better to ask them, because otherwise the input and output, there'll be a lot of difference, right? Provide feedbacks. So when you do all these, your communication becomes very, very clear and completely clear. There's no use of jargons, clear language is there, no complex sentences. They become very, very simple sentences are formed. Okay, now let's quickly move into the next segment on high stake communications. I'm sure all of us do high stake communications in whatever roles we do, right? It could, and what could be some of the high stake communications? It could be providing feedback. Feedback need not always be in a performance appraisal. Feedbacks can be every time, every day. It could be to a friend, it could be on a personal level, it could be on a professional level. Okay, we do resolving conflicts on a regular basis, or we could be presenting some data to a senior leadership team, or we could be negotiating with the clients or vendors. It all depends upon the roles that we play. We could be communicating during a crisis or a change, handling escalations, complaints. So there are different kinds of communications that we do on a regular daily basis based on the roles that we all do in our workspaces. Okay, and also in our personal spaces, right? So I'm going to talk to you about, or I'm going to teach you about two simple frameworks today in this. Okay, though we may not dive deep into it, but at least I want to leave a thought of two simple frameworks which you can start using in your everyday life. Okay, the frameworks are, one is the BLUF framework. Okay, the bottom line up framework. Okay, which you can use it for in any kind of a communication. It could be an email writing, it could be a status update kind of a session you're doing. Okay, another one I want to talk to you about, the SBI. I'm sure when I say the SBI, I'm sure all of you will be thinking of the SBI bank, right? So that's a very recall. That's in that way you can always recall this particular kind of a model, right? The bluff and the SBI. So it's very easy techniques I wanted to bring into you, which you can always remember. Okay. So the bluff BLUF framework or the bluff framework is like the main point comes in the, I'm sure I'm going to also share with you an example in this next slide. Okay, you're going to emphasize the main point first. Okay, why this method? Because we are in a very the time crunch is very I mean very important for all of us. We all are fighting on tight deadlines all the time, right? So it becomes this particular feedback. Let me give an example for you to understand better, right? The project is 10 days behind schedule due to unexpected vendor reasons for that, right? So it's important for us to remain on track, right? So, and you also, this simple 2 lines is what you will say. What is the top, what is the bottom line? The bottom line is that the project is delayed by 10 days. So that should be your first statement all the time, right? And then you will share the supporting. For example, because like the way I said, people should understand what is happening first, and then you can share the supporting data, like the way I shared in the examples. We encountered a delay in the material delivery because of some XYZ reasons, right? The team had adjusted the timelines, but without any additional, there were some missing deadlines and delivery date. We are requesting 2 contract testers. So then you can go into the supporting details a little more later. So firstly, you can also use these kind of even in your email conversations, right? Or well, like the way I said, while you are in a meeting, you can always use this, right? So first thing first. So this helps us to reduce, giving too much of data. And remember, we initially spoke about clarity in communication. This is a very beautiful framework for bringing in clarity in communication, right? Why? Because the message is upfront. It saves your time in high-stake meetings and focuses attention on solving decisions, right? Another method, which is the SBI method, okay? It's like a feedback that you want to give. Sometimes we want to give for negative constructive feedbacks, positive constructive feedbacks. In all those places, you can use these, right? For example, delivering difficult news. For example, during today's team huddle, what is the behavior? I shared that the budget for the next quarter has been reduced. I understand this might affect morale, and I want to stay transparent and solution focused together. So first you will say the situation, then you will say the behavior, and then you will say the intent. Okay, so yesterday, another example, yesterday during the client presentation, you stepped in confidently when the lead speaker had technical issues, right? What is the impact it had? That showed great teamwork and helped maintain the client's trust in our delivery. So it's a very positive, constructive feedback that you want to give. So situation, behavior, and impact. How did it impact the situation is what you have to say. So when you use this kind of a framework, there is a lot of clarity in what you want to communicate, right? So these are some two very beautiful frameworks, which I also use these frameworks in my regular communication. So it makes it very easy for you to understand. Okay, so let's move into a last segment. Okay, quickly another 5 minutes, and then we can move into the question and answer session. I'm going to give you some 10 tips today to speak smart. While we did share a lot of thought process I did share with you on clear, clarity, non-verbal communication, active listening, but maybe we will re-emphasize them in these tips. Let's be clear and concise, okay? In our daily regular communications that we do. So being clear and concise is very important. No assumptions, no jargon, simple English is what we'll have to use. Okay, pause before responding, right? Just give a pause before responding. Don't just rush into conversations. Sometimes we must have heard our elders telling, okay, count 1 to 10. But I always tell people, count from the reverse, right? Like the way you count from the odd numbers, like so for example, say count from 19, 17, 15. Sometimes if you are in a very conflict kind of a situation, then this particular technique will always help you, right? Count odd numbers in the reverse, so it gives you mentally, it gives you a lot of time before you respond, because the way I said, communication is very, very important, okay, in our daily life, and trust becomes very, very important in our daily life. That's how we can communicate better with people while we regain trust. Use open body language, okay, while you are communicating, your gestures, okay, your tones, your tonality, the tone that you use also makes a lot of difference, okay. Avoid filler words, okay, because those filler words sometimes may not be easy and understandable by everybody, right? Confirm understanding. Hey, do you understand what I'm trying to say? So confirm your understanding. Prepare ahead for, if it's an important conversation, don't go very unprepared. Start preparing for them well in advance. Keep messages short and to the point. Remember, bluff, BLUF, bottom line up front. That's a framework that we saw, right? So that way it's very, very important, right? Ask questions to ensure understanding, okay? So when you ask questions, what happens is, it's not that you have not understood, but you are clarifying, comprehending, and you are summarizing. And that is what is active listening, okay? Practice active listening every day, okay? So you need to practice it. See, whatever tips I would have taught you here today is to practice every day. So unless we practice, it does not, because overnight we don't learn things. Unless until we start doing it on a regular basis, we can do that, okay? Last but not the least, stay transparent and solution focused, which is also one most important part in communication, okay? That's very, very important. Being transparency in communication is very, very important. If you feel that the project is not happening, not going well, right? What happens sometimes, I'm sure most of you are working with customers, right? Then rather than bringing a very sorry figure towards the very end, it's always better to be transparent in the very beginning, and so that our conversations become more important, because remember, trust also plays a very, very important role. Let's quickly wrap up. So today we discussed communication shapes perception, trust, and success, okay? We also discussed about clarity and confidence building through strong impactful messages. We also saw an example how we could do that. We also discussed about how active listening and non-verbal cues creates deeper connections, okay? And in high stake moments, like, okay, we also spoke about, we always, at every day, we are into high stake communications, right? Irrespective of the roles, right? We also saw two frameworks. One is the BLUF, the bluff, and the SBI, okay? Bluff is the bottom line upfront. Always keep that, what is the most important message upfront, and then give the substantiating why it happened in two simple lines, okay? And then the SBI, situation, behavior, impact. What was the situation? What was the behavior in that particular situation, and how did it impact? It could be positive, it could be even negative, right? So it could be a positive constructive one, it could be a negative constructive one. So you can use any of them, right? Speak smart with intention, empathy, and purpose. We also saw some quick 10 tips that we can always use in our regular daily life. Okay, some reflections. I would definitely want you all to probably, if you have a notebook or a notepad, write down, or maybe you could share it in the question while you are in the pop, what you really learned. I'm sure all of you would have some takeaways from this session. So at least make a small note of your reflections that you've had in this particular session. Okay, what will you start doing differently after this? Probably we would have spent some 45 to 50 minutes by now, right? What have you really gained from this session, right? Some reflection from your end. Okay, so I think you can probably, hello? Hello? So if you are interested to know more about the kind of programs, I'm sure you can leverage through our VILT courses, okay? the communication fundamentals. These are there as a part of the course. You can make note of this, okay, and we can connect back with you on this, okay. Now we can open the session for question answers.
Hello. Do we have any questions for the session?
Any questions? We can take it up. Okay, learnt about SBI and bluff. Sharath has mentioned. Anything else that you feel that you was not very clear in today's conversation? We can always take it up.
Hi, I think we have a question.
Okay, what is it? Can you please show the 10 tips again? Sure, sure, why not? Yes, this is for Ajaya Bhuvan. Okay. Yes, the 10 tips are: be clear and concise. I hope you're making a note of it. Be clear and concise. Pause before responding is the second one. The third one is use open body language. Okay. Pause before responding, like the way I said. Don't just come to a conclusion and just immediately say. Depending upon the situation, you can take your time and respond to it. Okay. Use open body language. Avoid open body language. I'm talking about, if you are in a face-to-face conversation, then the way you use your hands, your eye contact, your tonality, all those make a lot of, and then not most important, that smile on your face is very important. Avoid filler words because sometimes it may not be understood by the other person. Okay, don't use words with jargons. Okay, which the other person, abbreviations which the other person may not be able to understand. You confirm understanding, which means let the other person know that whatever you have tried to convey is understood by the other person. Okay, prepare ahead of important conversations, which means in case of the conversation, if you're going for any kind of a meeting, be sure that you're ready with your conversation, what you're going to speak there. Keep messages short and to the point. We learned about bluff, right? So you can use that in whether you're writing your email, whichever conversation you're doing, your status updates that you want to give. So use that particular framework. Okay, ask questions to ensure understanding, because that's when your listening cycle gets completed, right? Asking questions is not that you're not understood, but you're just re-clarifying so that there are no assumptions and the outputs are always mapped with the inputs. Okay, and you practice active listening every day. That's very, very important. Okay, because like you should be self-aware and be very be very confident. Self-confidence is also very, very important. Okay, stay transparent and solution focused. Transparency in communication is very, very important, and don't always stick to problems. Try and move to solutions. That's when you actually open up and speak, right? So staying transparent and being solution focused, try and move to things which are always under your control, right? So be solution focused all the time rather than sticking to problems. Okay, I hope what's one small habit I can build to become a more confident speaker. Okay, so Radhika, this is for you. What you can do is you can always do a daily practice. Okay, a practice is very, very important. You can't become a confident speaker overnight. I'm sure you might be a great communicator, but to be a confident speaker, you have to do a lot of, if you follow the 10 tips that we've been talking about, right? But make it an everyday practice, like the way I said, take a confident speaker, I understand, in terms of presentation. Then if that's the case, then try and do a lot of rehearsals. Okay, look at some great speakers, look at some great presentations, right? Look at, I sometimes probably look at Tony Robbins, right? So they all are great presenters, right? So you can always look at those presenters using body language. All that becomes very, very important. But to become a confident speaker, practice is what you need on a daily basis. Okay, your tonality, your voice. So start reading some stories. And I always say, people, start reading stories if you want to really improve your tone and your expressions, right? That's the storytelling part of it. Okay. What's the good way to stop myself from interpreting and answering too quickly? Yeah, if you remember 2 words I told you, Radhika, that was, being very self-aware and mindful. Okay, pause. Sometimes it's important that, just calm yourself. Just calm yourself. Be very mindful. You need to be aware. Self-awareness is very, very important, right? Start practicing it. You can't immediately change. But it's great that you mentioned about interrupting, right? Before that, just pause. So just give yourself a pause, okay, and before reflecting. And I'm sure once you try doing that on a regular daily basis, you can definitely overcome this particular, in your conversations. Pausing is the best way to, when you feel that you are just give that pause to yourself. Count yours, like the way I said, no, count in your mind in the reverse, right? From 17, 15, 13, 11. Then what happens? You are actually pausing your mind there. You are not, interruptions are not there while you are in the conversations. Okay. Or you can probably, while the session is too short, while I have discussed in my sessions, you can anchor something and, keep it in your mind. Probably you can say, do something like this, put your fist and your hand together. So which means when you do that action, that means you are actually being self-aware of that. So there are many, which I do during my coaching sessions. You can also do those kind of, actions for, getting yourself not to speak or interrupt. So those are self-awareness activities that you can get into doing. I hope I answered your question. Any other questions? Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Can we end the session then?
Yeah, sure. I hope everyone has their questions answered. Thank you, Mrs. Nair, for an insightful session. Now, if you'd like to continue building on today's learnings, we invite you to explore our virtual instructor-led trainings and self-paced courses available at springpeople.com. Our VLT programs are delivered online, offering the flexibility to learn from the comfort of your home, on your own schedule, and from any location. Now, if you don't find a suitable batch, we'd be happy to discuss and arrange a private session tailored to your needs. For more details, feel free to write to us at training@springpeople.com or call the number displayed on your screen. We are here to help you take the next step in your learning journey. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We shall be sending out the webinar recording to all participants soon. Now, I request you to kindly provide feedback before signing off, which will help us improve the quality of our future events. Thanks again for joining us today. Signing off on behalf of Team Spring People. Hope to see you again for our next expert webinar. Take care. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.